Imagine waking up one day to find that your country, once battered by war, is now the richest and most powerful nation on Earth. That's exactly what happened to the United States after World War II. But how did a country that had just spent billions fighting a global war suddenly dominate the world economy? Was it luck, a secret strategy, or something far more shocking? World War II left much of the world in ruins, cities bombed to the ground, economies shattered, and millions of people displaced. The devastation was unimaginable, with entire communities wiped out and infrastructure obliterated. The war had taken a heavy toll on both human lives and the global economy. But for the United States, it was the beginning of an unprecedented economic explosion. Factories that once churned out tanks and bombers were now producing cars, refrigerators, and televisions at an insane rate. The American industrial machine, which had been geared towards war production, seamlessly transitioned to peacetime manufacturing. This shift not only revitalized the economy, but also transformed the American way of life. The production of consumer goods skyrocketed, meeting the demands of a population eager to embrace modern conveniences. Refrigerators, once a luxury, became a common household item, symbolizing the newfound prosperity. Televisions too became a staple in American homes, revolutionizing entertainment and information dissemination. America didn't just bounce back from the war, it soared to heights no one could have predicted. The economic boom led to a surge in consumerism, suburban expansion, and a higher standard of living for many Americans. But was this economic miracle inevitable, or was there something behind the scenes driving it? The factors contributing to this explosive growth were complex and multifaceted, involving government policies, technological advancements, and a resilient workforce ready to rebuild and innovate. Before the war, the U.S. was still recovering from the Great Depression. The 1930s had been a time of severe economic hardship, with widespread unemployment and countless businesses closing their doors. Families across the nation struggled to make ends meet, often relying on soup kitchens and bread lines for their next meal. Unemployment was high, banks were failing, and millions struggled just to put food on the table. The stock market crash of 1929 had left a lasting impact, and the economy was in shambles. People were desperate for any kind of work, and the future looked bleak. Then, suddenly, the war changed everything. The onset of World War II created an urgent need for military supplies and personnel. This demand led to a massive mobilization of resources and people, transforming the economic landscape almost overnight. Factories were running 24/7, millions of people were employed in the war effort, and the economy was booming. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers, taking on roles that had been traditionally reserved for men. The war effort united the country and revitalized industries that had been dormant for years. But once the war ended, many feared the country would slip back into depression. The sudden cessation of wartime production raised concerns about potential unemployment and economic instability. People wondered if the prosperity they had experienced during the war years would be short-lived. Soldiers were coming home by the millions. Would there be jobs for them? The nation faced the daunting task of reintegrating these veterans into civilian life. Families were reunited, but the question of sustainable employment loomed large. And what about all those wartime factories? Would they shut down, leaving the country in economic chaos? The transition from a wartime to a peacetime economy was fraught with uncertainty. However, the ingenuity and resilience of the American people would soon pave the way for a new era of growth and prosperity. So what really happened? Here's how America pulled off one of the greatest economic transformations in modern history. The same industries that built tanks and planes quickly shifted to making consumer goods. Car companies like Ford and GM went from producing military vehicles to mass-producing family sedans. The country's industrial capacity was unmatched, and now it was all focused on consumer needs. One of the smartest moves the U.S. government made was the GI Bill, which provided returning soldiers with money for college, home loans, and business startups. This created an explosion of skilled workers, homeowners, and small businesses, which helped drive demand for goods and services. Millions of young soldiers came home, got married, and started families. The birth rate skyrocketed, leading to the baby boom generation. With more families forming, the demand for homes surged, and the suburban lifestyle became the new American dream. This led to massive construction projects, more jobs, and a rapidly growing economy. The highway system and infrastructure boom. With suburbs growing, people needed a way to get to work. Enter the Federal Highway Act, which created a nationwide system of roads and highways. This didn't just connect cities, it created countless jobs in construction, boosted car sales, and made it easier to transport goods across the country. America's global economic dominance. While much of Europe and Asia were struggling to rebuild after the war, the United States was thriving. American businesses flooded international markets with goods, and the dollar became the world's dominant currency. The Marshall Plan helped rebuild Europe, but it also created a huge customer base for American products. The rise of consumer culture. For the first time in history, the average American family had money to spend, and they spent it. Advertising took off, promoting everything from washing machines to televisions. Shopping malls popped up across the country, and America became a consumer-driven economy. The Cold War and military spending. Even though World War II was over, tensions with the Soviet Union kept military spending high. The arms race and space race meant that billions were poured into defense industries, keeping factories running and millions employed. The result? By the 1950s and 60s, the US economy was unstoppable. Wages were rising, homeownership was booming, and consumer confidence was at an all-time high. The American dream seemed within reach for many, as new cars filled the streets and suburban neighborhoods flourished. America's middle class was thriving. Families enjoyed a higher standard of living with more disposable income to spend on leisure and entertainment. Children played in safe, spacious yards, and families gathered in cozy living rooms, reflecting the era's prosperity. The country became a global superpower not just militarily, but economically. American factories were buzzing with activity, and bustling cityscapes showcased the nation's industrial might. Wall Street thrived, symbolizing the financial strength of the United States. However, this golden age wasn't without its problems. Racial inequalities, gender disparities, and social injustices were prevalent. The civil rights movement gained momentum, and women began to demand equal rights in the workplace and beyond. Economic bubbles were lurking beneath the surface, threatening the stability of this newfound prosperity. Headlines warned of potential downturns, and protests against economic inequality began to emerge. But for the time being, the US was at its peak. Main streets were bustling with activity, families enjoyed picnics in the park, and shopping malls became the new social hubs. It was a time of celebration and optimism. So, was America's post-World War II economic rise inevitable? Not at all. It took smart policies, strategic investments, and a bit of global circumstance to make it happen. But one thing is certain, what happened in the decades after the war changed the world forever. And today we're still feeling the impact of those economic decisions. Want to see how another historical event changed the world? Watch this next video.